Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 27. My, we're really stacking them up. We touched on, via Jürgen's Hughes, experiences recently on souls about to reincarnate. And I'd like to touch on it some more. And going backwards a little in time, More Adventures in Eternity, my own second book from 2006, I think. Ooh, gee, can he remember? It's all so long ago now. I did make some efforts on that front, trying to talk to a number of souls getting ready to take the plunge. It's quite a long chapter, so I'll just read a section of it. And, hopefully give you the gist of the experience. Now, at this point in the book, 180 pages, the distinction between astral Gordon and physical Gordon has been more or less established. So it's astral Gordon that's talking here. And it's my experience that they're quite different beings. Related, but, unique. So here we are, out of body. I sat down with my back to a tree. Always a telltale sign. Within seconds I had merged with its spirit, felt its joy in being, and knew at least some of its ambitions. Then I shot up its spine and out into the astral space that could, if you want, be called sky. From there I spread out over the landscape like a fat cloud being flattened into a very thin pancake, with every square inch of that pancake conscious of the thoughts and desires of the astral beings below it. I say conscious, but maybe I'm exaggerating. Not so much the detail of every soul's aspirations, but a general impression of the collective semi-conscious. I say semi, as on the astral everything moves up a notch or two, so the collective unconscious of the physical plane becomes at least semi-conscious here. There's a vibrant, bustling kind of joy, an enthusiasm for adventure, a sense of game plans unfolding and lessons learned, the thrill of at least a glimpse or two of the plan of evolution, a seeing that it applies to spirit as well as form, and a kind of irrepressible giddiness at the interconnectedness of everything and everyone. Of course, that's just this level, which is largely populated with souls about to return to incarnation. There have been many others where conditions vary greatly from here. Having absorbed the vibe like an invisible sponge, I reassemble my attentions and move up a level or two, arriving at what the Theosophists call the Buddhic or intuitional plane. Here you just seem to know everything, or at least instantly understand each manifestation as it appears. All the painful contradictions of family and society seem very self-evident here. The seemingly pointless turmoil of existence appears all too obviously simple. That whole experience of, well, of course. Complex three-dimensional geometric structures float by, and I somehow understand the method of their construction as I perceive them. Music multiplying from one tone, the ultimate scheme of self-replication. Fast-forward movies of giant prehistoric mammals morphing into hawks and sparrows, of fish becoming hairy, leaning on rocks and trying to breathe, or various evolutionary strategies doomed to failure. The first being incest, the second man and beast, the third selective breeding based on rank and gender. Those almost unimaginably tough early days on the planet when various volunteers decided to decamp in favor of other planetary systems with an easier learning curve, and more, and more. All in about the time it would take to unwrap some chewing gum and pop it in your mouth. But I digress. Fun is fun, but I do have a purpose, and that is to inform you of some of the rich variety in the realm of re-embodiment. So let us return to the Valley of Cabins and see who is ready. I reappear in a small meadow in the middle of the forest and approach two women lying on the long grass. "Hello, ladies," I call, hoping to minimize the invasion of their privacy. Well, I need not have worried. Abby and Valerie, at least that is what they believe their mother has planned for them, are going to be identical twins. And it's not the first time either. Sure, they've been closely associated many times before, probably a little too closely for comfort. Mother and daughter, father and son, business partners, deadly rivals. They've done a bit of everything, actually, but almost always together. Last time they lived out their old age as spinster sisters in the mid-1800s in the cottage their dear father had bequeathed to them. Herbalists, gardeners, nature lovers, fulfilled in each other, they had no need for society. In fact, rather disapproved of it. This time their guides had convinced them to look outward instead of inward, and so, to that end, they have picked completely incompatible personality traits that should drive in a very early wedge, pushing them, hopefully, to either side of the continent, where they can face up to various challenges that their mutual devotion previously let them skip. Yes, they've been in and out of the womb a few times now. Fetus is about 5 months on. Mother very pleased with the ultrasound images. Dad a little panicky about money, already starting a small college fund. They'll be born somewhere in the Hudson Valley, but a job opportunity will likely have them brought up near London, England, by the time of their teen years, affording them both a mixed up bringing up and an easy access to various European locales, where they can work off the remaining heat from any of several karmic links. Budapest, St. Petersburg, Oslo, a variety of small towns throughout Belgium, Holland, Normandy, Tuscany, and the Greek islands will get a workout this time around. Husbands and children are definitely on the map this time too, although a number of complicating factors have the opportunity to intervene. Abby has a habit of running from the steady routines of family for the thrills of foreign adventure, and with the help of, well, it looks like he's going to be called Eric this time, she'll have the chance to jump ship one more time, but hopefully will have the strength to resist and stay the course. Eric apparently has been shown a possible opportunity to bring his outlaw talents to the fore once again. By the time they're all adults, the successful regeneration of organs from stem cells should be a done deal, science-wise. But resistance from various religious groups will restrict access in certain parts of the globe. He, or someone like him, will be instrumental in developing a climate-controlled and virtually indestructible set of carrying cases. And their inherited Robin Hood qualities will give them the ingenuity and drive to overcome the obstacles placed by repressive societies. This setup, of course, combined with Eric's customary maverick allure, will prove almost irresistible to the kitchen-clutching Abby, but resist is what she really wants and needs to do. Valerie laughs and says she'll believe it when she sees it. She, of course, will have no problem sticking to her domestic course. Stoking the home fires has rarely been a problem for her, at least in her female lives. Mothering and grandmothering are second nature by now, and by this time her two boys have promised neither to run off to war or die in some other young man bravado shtick, as they have done several times before. Biologist and gynecologist this time, Mom, they've promised, she tells me, laughing. I ask about parents. Yes, they're both well connected. My dad's been my uncle, brother, and son, and once, in Roman times, I had a torrid affair with him, Abby informs. That's until I got a witch to put a spell on her, Valerie grins. It worked, too, adds Abby. I sickened, got ugly spots on my face, and had to go to another witch to get the curse removed. And by that time I'd got all that done, he'd lost interest. Men! They squeal in unison. Want to hear about our male lives? Asked Valerie. Sure, says I. Comrades, monks, soldiers, business rivals. Don't forget the slaves, that's where we really bonded, pipes Abby. Yeah, but it was so nasty and tough, replies Valerie, that you hate to think about it, right? I know, but that's where we really started to care. When we were competing over the Greek senator, it was mostly pretense. Competitive envy was our bonding agent, and let's face it, his wife always came first. Not to mention his stupid crids. We won't even get into the prehistoric stuff. Way too violent for a family audience. I engage Valerie as she says this, wondering what they might have to say about Atlantis and Lemuria. Nothing, as it turns out. Maybe they haven't checked it out. When one does a past life review, one only accesses what one is ready to handle. There is no pressure to take on more than you can handle. Guides understand the need to focus in on certain themes and areas without complicating matters unnecessarily. And there's always time for the forgotten civilizations, not to mention the other planetary systems from which Earth seemed like a fascinating learning opportunity once upon a time. Abby asks if I'm about to incarnate. I tell her no, I'm just out adventuring while sleeping in Canada, taking notes for a book I'm writing. About people being reborn? Well, that's part of it. I outlined the Eternal Life trilogy for them and some other works that might spin off from its success. Stuff dear old Gordon hasn't even begun to think about yet. They seem impressed and joke about her reading it when they grow up. Their own higher self experience is still fresh, but it's one thing they both assume they'll forget while incarnate. Well, that is one of my purposes. I wish souls to make and remember that connection to Source. I want them, in the midst of all the earthly entanglements, to be able to embrace their divine connection. Be still and know that you are God, says Abby. Yes, I smile, that's it. It was hard to end such a pleasant interaction, but I could feel old Gordon stirring in his pre-dawn anxieties, the pull of the physical elemental pressuring the soul into another performance. And perhaps now is as good a time as any to tell you how astral Gordon feels about physical Gordon. I, emphasizing the figure of speech rather than the metaphysical conundrum, usually feel a combination of love, pity, and amusement. This poor blinkered being who carries me through the rocky terrain of an Earth day, with all its surging passions and conflicting thoughts, while I, in my way, remain a calm reservoir of wider perspectives and deeper inspirations, deserves all my sympathy for enduring what can only be a very tough haul, while I take a nightly vacation in the lands of next to no gravity and lots of laughs and light. That life of three rather shadowy dimensions is a psychic prison he endures for my and others' benefit, and my gratefulness, although innate, is perhaps not as often expressed as it should be. Well, there are other about to incarnate stories from other people that Astral Gordon meets there, but they're quite long and involved. So I'd like to return for the remainder of this episode back to Bruce Mullen, who we consulted earlier from his number 3 in his Voyages into the Afterlife series called Charting Unknown Territory. And we are going to, I think, continue on from some other explorations that Bruce had been making with his Monroe exploration group, Monroe Institute, that is. And they're here somewhere. I have found it. They're about to explore the Education Center on Focus 27. Placing my intent on finding the Education Center, moments later I was standing in what looked like a huge library. Shelves of books lined the walls along both sides of the long, wide corridor where I was standing. I assumed the shelves went to the ceiling. They went up vertically at least 20 feet and then faded out in a kind of fog I couldn't see into. The books on the close-spaced shelves were packed binding to binding, and the corridor extended in front of me as far as I could see. There had to be hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of books that I could just see from where I was standing. Wondering how to find out about the Education Centre, I looked around for someone who looked like they might work there. A likely-looking prospect came walking toward me, so I thought I'd try my luck. "Excuse me, do you work here?" I asked when the guy got real close. "Yeah, of course I do, you know that," he answered rather abruptly. "I'm a member of a group taking a tour of Focus 27, and I wonder if you could show me something of interest here in the Education Centre." The guy looked at me with such a strange, befuddled look on his face, as if he expected me to know my way around. With a little hesitation in his voice, like he was humouring me, he obliged. "Yeah, sure, something of interest. Let me see," he said as he blankly looked around. "Yeah, sure, follow me." He was walking towards what looked like a desk in the middle of the aisle. "This is what we call a holodesk. You're part of the Star Trek generation, so you ought to have some idea what it is and how it works." His tone was slightly condescending, like it irked him that he had to explain the device to me. The blank look on my face let him know he'd have to tell me more. "You take a book off the shelf and you put it in this slot right here," he said, pointing to an opening in the side of the desk. It looked big enough to accommodate any book I'd ever seen. "Then you sit down in the chair at the desk and decide what viewing speed you want to read the book at." We walked around the desk to where the chair was positioned. "Okay, so put a book in the slot, select the viewing speed. Then what happens?" I asked. "The story in the book gets played out in the 3D hologram like always," he said with mild exasperation in his voice. "I see. Thank you for taking the time to explain the holodesk to me. Maybe you could point out something else of interest that I could go explore on my own. That way I won't take up any more of your time," I said, hoping to smooth over any ill feelings I might have provoked. "Well, most of the time I see you here, you're headed toward the Hall of Bright Ideas." "What do you mean, most of the time you see me here? I don't even remember being in this place before." "I see you here all the time. I didn't realize you would remember being here before." "Why wouldn't you remember? Geez, Bruce, you really had me going." "I couldn't decide if you were playing some kind of game with me or slipping your clutch." "You mean I come here often? I see you here all the time. And we know each other? Of course we do. You're such a frequent visitor and a friendly kind of guy. We visit lots of times when you're here." "Oh, this has got to be a joke." "You mean you don't remember being here before?" he asked incredulously. "Not at all." "Well, walk around. Maybe I'll come back to you." "Okay, so which way to the Hall of Bright Ideas?" I asked. The tour guide pointed high in the air to a place behind where I was standing. When I first arrived, I hadn't looked behind where I'd landed, and that's where the guy was pointing. I turned around and there in front of me was a huge arch-topped doorway. Great big letters emblazoned around the arch said, "Hall of Bright Ideas." I suggest you follow the signs, my tour guide said dryly. This is where you usually see me heading when I come here? Yeah? Yep, most of the time. You always come into the building at the same place you came in this time, then you head in there. What's it for? I mean, what do I do usually in there? You don't remember that either? Humor me, please. Pretend I have amnesia and you're trying to help me remember. Okay, fine. Exasperation was beginning to sound in his voice again. The Hall of Bright Ideas is connected to the grid via filaments of consciousness to all possibilities. It returns all possible responses that fit any question. The grid? Don't tell me you don't remember what the grid is either. No, I don't. When you get to the coordinating center, ask them to explain the grid to you. Those guys work with it all the time. They can explain it to you better than I can. I had the distinct impression this guy was getting a little impatient and just putting me off. Just then I heard a little commotion behind me and the jibber-jabber of some familiar voices. Turning around, I saw a bunch of people from my Exploration 27 group, looking around and pointing. I moved closer to where they were standing. Hi guys, quite a place, isn't it? It took a few moments for them to recognize me, and then one piped up. Bruce, have you been here long? Find anything interesting to look at? Well, the holodesk is pretty neat. There's one right over there, I said, pointing to the nearest desk. We all walked over to the holodesk, gathered round it, and gawked. Do you know what it does or how it works? Somebody asked. Yeah, I met a crazy tour guide when I first got here and he explained it to me. Let's see. Well, first we have to pick a book from the shelves. The guy said when we put the book in this slot here, the holodesk will show the story that's in the book. Maybe we should pick a story most of us already know, someone in the group suggested. We all walked over to the shelves, and after a little while we settled on a story we all knew. Something about intrigues in a medieval Spanish royal family. The title escapes me now. Back at the holodesk, we put the book in the slot. Now what? Someone said. The guy said that you should sit next down to it in the chair and select the viewing speed you want. Then the story in the book is supposed to play like some sort of hologram on top of the desk. I sat down and saw a panel in front of me with 4 large push buttons. Let's see. We can watch the story at Savor, Informational, Relaxed, or Instant. After a brief conversation, we came to a consensus. Since we all know the story, why not see it real fast? Okay, instant it is. I moved my hand over the button marked Instant and left it hovering there. I don't know what the hell is going to happen when I push this button. Everybody watching the desktop? Ready, ready. Yep, go ahead, we're all set, came murmuring. I pushed the button. There was a very brief flash of light above the desktop. It coincided with something that felt like a silent firecracker exploding in my head. When it was over, all I knew about the story in the book was that it was about intrigues and power struggles between members of a medieval Spanish royal family. Guess we played it a little too fast. Anything else around here of interest? Someone in the crowd asked. Well, the guy showed me a place called the Hall of Bright Ideas, and that looked interesting. I explained what the tour guide had told me as we walked over to the entrance marked by a sign above the doorway. The same tour guide was standing close by, and at the risk of upsetting him, I asked for a demonstration. You've usually got some engineering design question you take in there. When I've seen you here before, that is. Seems like you use the place to find solutions to unusual, complicated new product, or machine-designed solutions most often. Well, if we wanted to see a demonstration right now, what product design question would you suggest? Look, it's your demonstration. You pick a design question, he replied, but abruptly. Feeling a little embarrassed at being spoken to in front of the rest of the group as if I should know how to do this, I stood there quietly wondering what to do. Whatever I took in as demonstration questions should be something I have no previous knowledge of, I thought to myself. No fair cheating. Surgical scalpels. I don't know anything about the design of a scalpel. How about I try that? I said, addressing the tour guide. It's your design and your responsibility, so you decide. Which he replied, exasperation back in his voice. With that, I walked through the doorway into the Hall of Bright Ideas. The rest of the group stayed outside the room to watch. As I moved further into the room, its rectangular shape, defined by bookshelves along both walls, metamorphosed into a hollow sphere that completely surrounded me. It was like watching one of those fancy TV commercials where one thing magically, smoothly changes into something completely different. When the process was complete, I was floating at the very center of a hollow sphere, perhaps 10 feet in diameter. The inner surface of the sphere was black and was covered with what looked like tiny little yellow lights. Examining the lights brought a sense like I was seeing the ends of thousands of optic fiber cables that extended in all directions from the outer surfaces of the sphere. I somehow knew that these were connections to the grid of all possibilities that the tour guide had mentioned. I'd like to see the design of a perfect surgical scalpel, I said to no one in particular. There was a slight buzzing sound that bounced back and forth between two tiny lights exactly opposite each other on the inner surface of the sphere. The rate of bouncing slowly settled down until it became a soft, steady buzz. I could see a beam of light between the 2 points of light passing through the exact center of the sphere. I reached out with my left hand and let the beam illuminate my palm. I felt something toward the extreme end of hard, along the continuum of soft versus hard polarity. Odd way to explain it perhaps, but that's what I felt. Next, the lights on either end of the clean ability polarity began to bounce a buzzing beam back and forth through the center of the sphere. That one settled out on the extreme end of cleanable. The polarity of smooth and rough lit up, ending up with a smoothness that eliminated pits and scratches big enough to host bacteria. Then a brittleness versus malleability polarity came on and caused a slight readjustment to soft versus hard. Staring at my hand, I began to see a prototype of the perfect scalpel taking form. I realized the Hall of Bright Ideas supplied the perfect balance of every polarity required in the design of a perfect scalpel. Polar opposites of every material property were added, one at a time, and when necessary, adjustments of previous settings were made. Somehow this place brought polar opposites into perfect balance, in a perfect combination. The scalpel design was nearly finished, and I was looking closely at the cutting edge, which started out as a combination of curved section near the tip and a straight section near the handle. Then the very edge of the blade began to undulate, giving it a sawtooth appearance. A gentle sine wave began to smooth out the jagged appearance. The sine wave stretched out, starting with perhaps 20 teeth along the entire cutting edge. When it reduced the number to 5 or 6 teeth, the edge slowly undulated back and forth between them, finally settling on 6 teeth. It was finished. The prototype was pure white, full-sized and resting in my hand. The sphere metamorphosed back into its former straight-walled, book-shelved appearance, and I was left standing in the room, holding a prototype of the perfect surgical scalpel in my hand. The rest of my group walked in and gathered around to look at it. "What do I do with it now?" I asked, calling out to the tour guide. "It's your design," came back sharply. "Use it for whatever purpose you made it for." "But it was just a demonstration. I don't have any other use for it." "You mean you don't want it?" the tour guide said in an unbelieving tone. "It was just a demonstration." "If you don't want it, then put it in one of the cubby holes there along the wall," he replied, exasperated. Looking at the nearby wall, I could see what looked like lots of little open mailboxes. "You mean these little mailbox-looking things? What happens if I put it in there?" "The planning center will get the word over the grid that we've got a design for the perfect scalpel up here in Bright Ideas. They'll know what to do with it. And no, I don't have any time to explain all that to you. Check with someone at the planning center when you get there." Okay, thanks for your help. Sorry I don't remember being here before, but that's the way it is. Well, um, I hope that little narrative chimes nicely with the excerpt from the Elsa Barker book, where young Lionel is takes a little trip with the narrator up to the pattern world to kind of personally lasso a mechanical design that he feels he's going to use in his next life. Um, there aren't many accounts of such things in the literature, but there are some. Often it's referred to a little more vaguely in the terms of, the mental realm, where all ideas exist to be manifested. And that is touched on in the early theosophical literature, but I don't remember any concrete examples as we have here. And I'm glad Bruce took the time to show us that. Thank you, Bruce. And much more from Bruce later, and Jurgen. And until then, I trust that you have found this stimulating and entertaining. And we will meet again, perhaps out there. So long.